Hey Claire,
Hi, Jono.
how are you?
Very good. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Excited to be here to have a chat today about charity and agency relationships. So, first thing I need to check though, have you got your cup of tea? I know how much you love tea.
I do. Perfect cup of tea. Thank you. Have you got your coffee?
Of course,
Typical Aussie.
as always. Yeah. Now, I just realised we probably should actually introduce ourselves, so I'll let you go first.
Cool. So I'm Claire Baxter. I'm from Liverpool in the UK, which is the accent, but I'm now lucky enough to live in sunny Brisbane. So it's pretty sunny for the afternoon and for it being winter. But I have been working in fundraising for about 10 years, and in that time, I've worked in the UK, the US, and Australia. And I'm really excited to have a chat to you today about working with agencies, as I have got quite a bit of experience of working with different types of agencies in different countries.
Awesome. Good stuff. Well, we're going to get into that in a bit of detail in a minute. Probably should introduce myself as well. So, I'm Jono Grapsas, and I'm the founder of an agency called Flat Earth Direct, also based in sunny Brisbane, just near Clare. And we're a direct response fundraising agency. So Claire and I have had the pleasure of working together across two stints in two organisations over the last 5 or 6 years. So we've got to know each other pretty well. So let's get right into it, Claire. Okay. First thing I want to talk about is when's the right time to work out if and when you need an agency? Like what do you use as a measure to decide it's the right time to work with some outside support?
Yeah, so for me and for a lot of my colleagues, how we've found the time to look for an agency is when we have a gap to be filled. So that could be a gap that is skills and knowledge and expertise, or it could be a resource gap, and that's very dependent on the size of your organization and also, the skill set in house. So I've worked with agencies when we literally haven't had enough bodies in the building to help us, but I've also worked with agencies when we don't have the expertise and skills, or we do, but we need fresh ideas to come and like take our campaigns to the next level.
Okay, cool. So let's say you're working for an organisation like Kidney Health Australia, and you've decided that you need some support. How do you find the right agency?
It's a good question. So finding the right agency is not always as easy as it sounds. We quite often will speak to colleagues either in within the organisation or in similar sized organisations to get some personal referrals. Do a lot of Google research. Check them out on FIA, like Fundraising Institute of Australia web pages. But when we find an agency that we're interested in, I think the best thing to do is to speak to clients that they're working with directly, ask them, you know, what the best and the worst things are of working with that agency. But really, I suppose the key for me is to take it slowly and don't rush in. Don't find an agency, get really excited and put all your eggs in one basket. How I've worked and how it's worked successfully is by just doing like either test runs with agencies and seeing the results, seeing how the processes work, how the relationship works, and then building that work up. But just try not to commit too soon is probably my advice for that. But Jono, I don't know, how do people find you from an agency side?
Well, I tell you how they don't find it, how I wouldn't recommend finding the right agency partner, and that's through a tender process, or in
Yeah.
some parts of the world, it might be referred to as an RFP or request for proposal. Look, in my experience, mostly that's an absolute waste of time for everybody involved. I mean, partly because you've got a situation where often the organisation that tenders the work knows before they go into it who they want to work with. It's a formality, but also because it tends to be window dressing. It's very much about who pitches the best. I kind of often relate to it as the Tinder of charity and agency relationships, because it's very much about instant attraction. It's about whether they like each other up front. There's a bit of flirting. It's all about show and tell and kind of showing that you can do the work, but it's not really about delivery and execution and results. And so in my experience, it's very much, I think, to the same point you made, is almost try before you buy. Like if you like somebody and want to work with that agency, perhaps suggest working on one project to start with and see if that works out. And if it doesn't, no one gets hurt because you walk away fairly quickly. Whereas in tender processes, and what I see often is that organisations get themselves tied up in long-term contracts they can't get out of. And they end up being miserable for a long time because they're stuck in a contractual relationship they can't get out of.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point and very true. And I'm sure there's a lot of fundraisers watching this that have spent hours and hours ticking boxes and filling out information and quotes just to push paper for no actual reason at the end of the day, when, like you say, you usually know who you want to work with up front.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So when people do find you, Jono, what do you find makes the most successful agency charity relationship? Like, what are the key ingredients for success?
Yeah, I think it's obviously different for everybody, but what I've learned over the years is probably a few things. The most important, I think, is that you have the absolute buy-in from everybody involved in that relationship, on the charity side in particular. So if somebody is new coming into an organisation, often they feel like they've inherited that agency. That often doesn't turn out well, and that's fair enough because it's not the agency they've chosen to work with. Doesn't mean it can't work, but it doesn't mean that the key people, often including CEO, sometimes board members, really need to understand what the value of that relationship is and whether that's a good fit for them. Second thing is, I do think you have to like each other. You don't have to love each other, but I do think you need to like each other. And I always talk about the fact that any of my clients that I work with at any particular point in time, they're all the sort of people that I would have over for dinner because I would value their company and I value their relationship, and they're the sort of people that we share the same kind of common values. So I think that's really important.
Where's my invite?
Oh, sorry, was that? It might have got held up in the mail with all the tax appeal mailings going.
It's been 5 years and I've still not had a dinner invite.
True, but we're doing a Zoom coffee, tea thing. So you're kind of in my house anyway. So it's the next best thing, but we've got to make that happen. I also think it's really important that everyone's clear about what you're trying to get out of it, not just the entire partnership, but also each individual project. If you don't have a clear brief in terms of what we're trying to do, it's impossible to know whether or not that's worked. And probably the last thing, which I think a lot of people forget about, is it's got to be fair for everybody. I think there's sometimes an expectation that charity agency relationships, very much the charity holds control. And ultimately they pay the bills, I get that. But at the same time, it's got to be fair and equitable for both parties. And if it is, I think you can have and all those other things happen as well. Often you can have a really, really long relationship. We've got clients now we've worked with for 7 or 8 years and they're going really strongly. So, yeah. What about you? In your experience?
I completely agree. For me, it's like you said, it's really that partnership. So you're working with an agency and you really need to treat them as a genuine extension to your team. You celebrate the wins, you commiserate the losses, they've fully bought into the vision and mission of your organization. And the way you do that is that you make sure that you report back, that you allow the agency to understand exactly the role they're playing, not just in that project, but in the wider and bigger picture of, how does that project and that campaign impact, the long-term goal or, the immediate goal of supporting your beneficiaries. And if they're informed and they feel part of the team, then you're going to get great results from it because, they feel more accountable, and it's not just, I'm doing this because I've been asked to, it's I'm doing this because I know how important it is. And like you said, it really is, it's a two-way relationship. It's not us and them and, client and agency. You shouldn't be treated as a third party. You really should be treated as part of the team and work as collaboratively as possible.
So true. Now, this is all great because it sounds like we've got this fabulous working relationship. You found the right agency. It's all working.
I've got a dinner invite.
Correct. Dinner invitation's on its way. But what happens when it goes pear-shaped? Okay, you're talking to your fundraising friends in the pub and they're having a bit of a whinge about their agency relationship not working out. What's your advice to them?
I think firstly, identifying when it's not working is quite often the hardest bit. I'm sure all fundraisers can relate that you're driving 100 miles an hour, it's go, 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 you've got deadlines, you're trying to achieve results. And, if it's ticking along in the background, that's great. But if it's not actually doing what you want it to do, it's hard to sometimes stop and review. So I would encourage, often booking in time to review, is it working? Are you getting what you want? And the way to do that is to see, are you working as effectively as possible, and are you getting the bang for your buck? Because as a fundraiser, every dollar you spend needs to have the best return. And when that isn't working, you need to be upfront, you need to be open and transparent, and you need to sit down and have that conversation with the agency. And hopefully you've got to the point, like where we said earlier, you've got a great relationship, you've built that two-way relationship up, so it's easy to have that conversation. But it might not be, you might not have a great relationship, and having a difficult conversation will probably only make it worse. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility as a fundraiser to ensure that you put solutions in place to support a better future together. So I suppose the way I've done it in the past, and I've done it with yourself, Jono, we've worked for many years and we've had a great relationship, and some projects haven't quite gone as swimmingly as we hoped. And what we've done is we've sat down over a cup of tea, importantly, and really just laid it all out, like the ugliness as well as the prettiness. It's all out there, so we know exactly what page we're on, and we can find a solution together to move forward. And the way we've moved forward in a lot of parts of the work is a hybrid approach and being flexible. So, and that's both myself and yourself, so it needs to be two-way. But I'm sure I've not had the ugliest experiences. I'm sure you've had some worse. Janet, do you want to share any?
Well, I'm happy to, anonymously, of course, to protect those involved. But yeah, you're right. All jokes aside, I mean, sometimes it doesn't work out. That's just the reality of what we do, working in agencies. And certainly had many experiences in the past where you realise, and often quite quickly, this is not going to work. And in most instances, in my experience, it's not necessarily because of the people you're working with. It's often because the organisations aren't quite aligned. I remember one story from about 5 or 6 years ago. We started working with an organisation, very excited about the project. We're about a month in, and then things started to not quite feel right. I could tell that what they wanted out of the relationship was not what I thought we had agreed to do. So I got on the phone one day with the head of fundraising, and we had a very mature and equal breakup. I mean, it was really like that. It was a absolutely harmonious split. And I remember this particular fundraiser saying to me at the time, look, it's not about you, it's about us. And if I was in another organisation, I would happily hire you guys again. Now, fast forward, I think it was less than a year, that person rang me and joined a new organisation. And we had a chat about a particular piece of work, which didn't happen. But the point about it was that she was honest to that point. And it generally wasn't about us as individuals or our team or their team. It was just that it wasn't quite the right fit. And both of us recognised that and agreed that it was a really mutual breakup. It does actually exist. So I think recognising it and trusting your gut. In most instances, your gut is right. So I think make sure that if you recognise it's not going well, do something about it. But to your point as well, absolutely, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. If you need bits and pieces, but you also can do some of it yourself, that's okay. Be flexible, everyone. I mean, that's the whole point of it. It's not just about we do everything, you guys just support over there.
Yeah.
It's whatever works for everyone, and it's fair, as I said before. Cool. Last question I wanted to ask you, Claire. You mentioned before you've been working as a fundraiser for about 10 years. So if you had the opportunity to look back 10 years to when you were starting as a fundraiser and thinking about entering into relationships with agencies, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I wish I knew a lot of things, but but if we stick to agency and fundraising world, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that one size doesn't fit all. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo and say, we'd love to work with you. We know this is your model, but for our organization, we really just need this bit and this bit, or can we test working on this hybrid model? Because that's what will get the best out of the relationship, moving forward. And, the reason that I say don't be afraid to challenge the status quo or ask is because quite often as a fundraiser, you'll go into an organization, there'll be an agency, like you say, that they've worked with for 10 years, and you've got fresh eyes, you've got a fresh opportunity to just check if it's right and check if that's the most effective way to work. And that's where you need to step in and say, actually, you know, we've reviewed this, can we attempt a different way? Make sure that the relationship you have is making improvements. I know a lot of people that work with agencies, and when I question or ask, you know, oh, why do you work with that agency? It's like, oh, because we always have, or because, you know, it makes my life easier. But if they're not actually making an improvement, then you need to stop and review that as well. You know, like I said, you're spending money, it's, you know, valuable resource and money that you're spending. So it's got to be for the right reasons. And be excited, you know, be excited to work with that agency. You know, there's so many times that people are a bit dubious about working with agencies because like, oh, it's going to cause me a headache, or they're just not going to get it, or they don't understand all the dramas I'm in. If you've got a good agency, they should get it all, and you should be able to have, you know, open conversations with them and allow them to, you know, support you as well. But you want to work with an agency that makes your job more exciting and more, you know, yeah, exciting really, because they're bringing fresh ideas. They're not stuck in the bureaucracy and the red tape internally that you have. But I suppose I've been around for 10 years. Jono, you've been around a little bit longer than me. And I know you've not been the fundraiser, but surely you've got some advice that either you wish you knew 10 years ago as an agency worker, or that you'd love the new and fresh fundraisers to know, so that it makes your life and, you know, future agency workers
Yeah.
life a bit easier.
Thank you very much, Claire, for pointing out that I've been working in this area for far too long. No, it's a good point. I think going back to what I talked about earlier is get it right up front. So make sure you go through a process to find the right partner and invest in them. But at the same time, if it's not working, get out. You know, I see this too often where you see relationships that have gone sour, but really either they shouldn't have worked together in the first place, or there was opportunities to stop that work and they kept going for whatever reason that may be. So I think that's probably the most simplistic and hopefully useful advice that I can give. We probably should wrap it up. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Claire. That was really useful, and I appreciate you taking the time. Your dinner invitation is on the way, but I only have one final question before we wrap up. Surely it's time for a drink, isn't it?